Hi, my name is Alex Konieczny. I'm a historic interpreter here at the beautiful Troy Historic Village. In 1955, Troy became a city, and since then it has grown to a bustling, multicultural city full of people from all over the world. This project, Many Stories, One Heritage, seeks to record the authentic stories of first and second generation Asian American immigrants to this city who now call it home. The following interview you're about to hear is one of 12 interviews we've recorded for the Many Stories, One Heritage project.
I am a first-generation Vietnamese American, so my parents immigrated here from Vietnam, two separate time zones, time dates, whatever you want to call it, early 70s and late 70s. And my dad moved here on a whim because he just hopped on a plane. An American businessman said, you know, stuff's not good, you have an opportunity to go, it's now or never. So he basically took a leap of faith, got on the plane, came to Minnesota, and then migrated down to Texas, whereas my mom was actually one of those boat people that you hear about on the History Channel where she couldn't handle communism anymore. So she decided to, because her mom passed away, her grandma passed away, she had nothing to live for. She's like, I can't do this. So she basically tidied up everything, hopped on a boat, paid a captain a small fee, and they just floated because the ship actually lost the engine after about 3 days on sea. And they just floated, got picked up by a U.S. tanker, and you know, in the 80s they had me, and here I am today as a Vietnamese American, I guess, professional working in the world.
What did your family do when they first came here?
My dad struggled a lot with the language. He learned the English language through TV, actually, through the late 70s, you know, Sanford and Sons and all those shows that that decade and generation grew up with. So for him, that was the first barrier. The second barrier was trying to learn his trade and his skill to be useful in this society that he was just introduced to. For him, it was being supported by a church family that basically sponsored him in Texas. So he slowly learned English the wrong way, but he still learned English, and he learned a skill trade where he was being a technician for laser optics. So for 35 plus years, up until he retired not too long ago, he was doing defense work for the military with scopes and stuff, and he was the one managing the machine. Whereas my mom, she actually got picked up by a U.S. tanker, and they had to ship her to Australia because America wasn't taking in any exiles for a while. So Australia did. She lived there for a year. My dad did the paperwork for her to come over, and she basically worked at a school cafeteria as a dishwasher because that was the only trade she kind of knew, and she had broken English, and it was a language barrier as well. Unfortunately, she got taken advantage of, and they made her mop the floors. That was not something that was in the requirement. So after about a year, I believe she quit, and she said, you know what, I'll stay home, take care of the kid, me. And my dad worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food in our bellies because it wasn't worthwhile for my mom to try to work and then trying to find daycare because it was so expensive. So that's what they ended up doing.
What kind of reception did your parents receive when they first arrived?
For my dad, it was very welcoming because of the church family sponsorship. They were all about helping immigrants and getting them up on their feet financially, professionally, and everything in between. For my mom, I think it was more of a culture shock. It was a culture shock once to go to Australia, which is not so different from America, but it's still a lot different. And then culture shock again in '82 when she came over to Texas and realized this is a whole new world. I'm starting from scratch all over again in my late 30s, early 40s. This is not cool. So she was very hesitant, and I think because my mom's really strong into the Eastern culture, she wanted to hold on to that so badly, but then she couldn't assimilate with the Western culture. So she had a hard time adjusting. To this day, she still has a hard time. But through the years, after 30 plus years of being in America, she's learned to adjust a little bit.
Are there any early memories that stick out to you?
Yes. My mom didn't tell me that I spoke a different language because she wanted to hold on to that culture of keeping your Vietnamese culture very deep and ingrained. She didn't want to lose that because in the end of the day, that's where we come from, and we want to retain that so that we could share it with others. She failed to tell me when I was from, a year old up until I had to go to preschool that we spoke a different language. So I never grasped the concept that when I was watching Sesame Street, that what I was hearing on TV, I couldn't quite understand, even though I understood everything my mom and dad and our family and our neighbors said, until I went to school. And I was on the playground, and I kind of caught a few words English-wise, and I understood the teacher to a certain degree. But when I went and communicated on the playground with my so-called classmates, I'm like, hey, can you push me on a swing? I said it in my language. And they looked at me like I had 3 heads. I was like an alien. And they screamed and ran the other way, and I got my feelings hurt at, age 4, age 5. Went home, told my parents. I like, how's your first day of school at preschool, half day? I'm like, it sucked. I didn't like it at all. Why are you making me do this? And she asked why, and I told her why. And she goes, oh yeah, by the way, we don't speak the same language as they do, and you have to learn this new language, and you're going to be bilingual. Okay, thanks. So that was a challenge in the beginning to assimilate with this new culture that I've been introduced to that I was not prefaced with. So that was definitely a shock to me.
Do you feel like you had more of an American or a Vietnamese upbringing?
Oh, definitely Westernized. More Westernized than Eastern. Although I am proud of my heritage, I do retain a lot of things, like being bilingual, being fluent in Vietnamese and being able to read and write is great because not a lot of individuals nowadays have the ability to speak another language. And it's very highly regarded once you get out in the real world and you become a professional. However, I like a lot of things that the Western culture offers. Your independence, the freedom of speech, your freedom of religion, all these things that you can't get anywhere else, especially in a communistic country where my parents came from. Everything's heavily regarded, heavily sedated, and as what the government says is what it goes. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity the Western civilization has given us, like the opportunity to go to school. I don't think I would have 2 degrees if I was in Vietnam. I wouldn't have the funds, I wouldn't have the money, I wouldn't have the opportunity because I wouldn't know a lot of people that could get me into a university. And then even if I did, I probably wouldn't be able to afford it after 2 years because where would I get the funds? But here you have the opportunity to get loans, scholarships, grants. I mean, the opportunities are limitless. So I'm more Westernized than anything else. And to that degree, my parents sometimes are like, whoa, push the brakes. You're still Vietnamese American. You're American, but you're Vietnamese. Keep some of that culture. I mean, I still tell other people about the Eastern culture that I retain. The traditional Vietnamese outfits I wear at my black ties or at events I go to, and they're like, what kind of dress is that? And I'm like, that's a Vietnamese traditional dress. This is how Vietnamese girls dress at a black tie event and even sometimes daily wear. I'm like, that's really cool. I've never seen something like that. And that's just educating the mass public on a sliver of other countries and other cultures.
Did your parents encourage you to be kind of more mainstream Western at all? Or
no, they discouraged it. They definitely discouraged me being a full-blown American, as they put it. Dating was an issue, right? Why don't you date your own kind? Or why can't you speak Vietnamese when you're home? You're going to lose the Vietnamese language, and then you're going to forget about us. And so they were very hesitant on me being mainstreamed. When other girls my age in high school were out for prom and homecoming and wanted to vie for the homecoming queen, I was at home watching TV with my family. I was at home knitting, learning how to knit. I was not your typical high school or even middle school. My childhood was very sheltered, very Eastern, and it's only when I step outside the household was then I could actually live out my Westernization needs. But they were very against being too Westernized and too American because they were afraid I was going to lose my roots.
So tell me about some of the places you've lived growing up.
You know, I'm not as worldly as I'd like to be. Being born and raised in Texas, I have a Southern twang, and I do not fit the mold of a normal, typical Asian. I have cowboy boots. I sing country music. I do things that are normal for a Texan. And then I moved out of the house when I got married, and I moved to Michigan about 8 to 9 years ago. So I travel, but from a living standpoint, I've only lived in Texas and now Michigan, and I definitely see that there's a difference geographically. Texans are more social and talkative, even to strangers. If you're in a line at the grocery store, it's super long, you'll make conversation with people. Here in Michigan, not so much. Maybe it has to do with the weather, or maybe they're just not comfortable with strangers. Whatever the case may be, it's two different geographical types of culture, as you can put it. There's culture within a culture. So for me, traveling abroad, Canada and Jamaica, again, you are open to a whole new door of how people live, how people talk, and how they retain their culture. And you take a little bit of that and kind of apply it to your life. But other than that, I haven't been much anywhere else.
Had your family ever been to the United States before they moved here?
No. My parents never wanted to leave their home country. Nobody really wakes up in the morning and says, I want to move to America. I mean, unless they have hardships, financial hardships, political hardships, whatever it may be, nobody really wants to uproot and move to something brand new, foreign, not what you're used to. It's a scary thought. So no, my parents never moved or even traveled abroad or even went to school. Like some students now have the opportunity to do a study abroad somewhere in Spain or China, but my parents never had that opportunity. They only went purely because they wanted a better opportunity for themselves, and if they had kids, which they had me, a better opportunity for their kids.
Have they ever talked to you about what that experience was like for them and what they were thinking?
My dad doesn't really want to talk a lot about it, but he does share as he gets older. He wants me to know his hardships and how he got here, whereas my mom doesn't want to talk about it at all. It was a scary time. I mean, imagine yourself being on a boat that's not that safe, probably has enough food for a week, and not knowing where your final destination is. And the fact that there's external factors of pirates trying to steal and hurt people, it's scary, but she took a leap of faith and did it. So she doesn't talk a lot about that, but I can tell why she's tough on me, because she's a tough cookie herself. But we don't talk about feelings a lot. It's something in our culture that we don't normally talk about, why we're sad and how a younger person would feel not respected, even if they're talking to an elder. You know, for Western culture, me, myself, and I have a voice. Well, it doesn't matter if you're talking to somebody older than you, especially if they're your parents, because they rule all. Right, wrong, or indifferent, they rule all. So I have a hard time talking to my mom and asking her when she doesn't really want to talk about it, because it's probably a bad memory for her. But my dad talks about how great the opportunity's been. Yeah, looking back, it was tough making that migration, but in the end, it was all worth it for him.
Does your family keep up their cultural traditions from Vietnam at all, or have they more assimilated?
They keep the main stuff. For example, when there's a death and an anniversary, and there's a death, so we do anniversaries on that day that they passed away, and the whole family gets together. It's a big old cookout, like a luau almost, except it's to honor the dead. And we still do that. It's a big shindig, and some of the family members who have married outside of our culture and our ethnicity, we bring them in too, and they learn something brand new. Lunar New Year is also a tradition we continue to hold close, even myself. I realize that as I get older, I'm doing a lot of things that my mom made me do as a kid that I hated. I hated cleaning, because you have to clean your house spick and span, from the blinds to scrubbing the floors, and I hated doing that. But I find myself doing that now with my own home, because my friends are like, well, what are you doing this weekend? I can't. I got to get prepped for Lunar New Year. The house has to be spick and span, because you can't clean 1 week or so after the Lunar New Year starts. It's bad luck, because you don't want to sweep away any of the good luck. So that's why I retain it. It could be hearsay. It could be just, it's all in my head. But that's what I grew up with, and I want to retain some of that, and I think I would pass it down to my kids if I ever have them. It's something special and something cool. Why deny it? Embrace it.
What was it like growing up in a Vietnamese family in the United States?
It's like I led a double life, because when I'm with my family and our surrounding friends and family members and extended family members, we were always compared. Who went where, who went to school and graduated early, who made more money, who had the best cars, you know. It was like milestones that I was supposed to achieve too. When I step outside of the Vietnamese community, it's, oh my God, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm free. I'm not compared. I'm not judged. And I'm accepted. And not because they have to, it's because they want to. They want to learn more about my culture. They want to get to know me. And it's not a comparison. It's, hey, we're going to support you because you graduated college. That's a big, big challenge, and you completed it. Whereas going back into the Vietnamese tight-knit community, it's great. You got a BA. Okay, now go get your MA. Okay, you got your MA. Go get a PhD. It's never enough. But that's because they didn't have much growing up. So they're living technically vicariously through their children, which is nothing wrong. But it does put a lot of pressure on the children that have to balance Eastern and Western, because all their friends are Western. Most of their friends are Western. And then they come home and they feel conflicted. So, you know, it is what it is.
Have you ever wanted to visit Vietnam?
Yes. Unfortunately, my jobs up until now doesn't allow me to have a lot of PTO, paid time off. So for me to travel abroad, especially to my homeland, I would need a lot of vacation days, about 2 weeks, because you got to acclimate the 24-hour airplane ride and then get acclimated to the time change and the weather change and all that stuff. So you need time to really take it all in. I don't have that kind of time in the job that I have, so maybe one day when I get to be more lax in time and I get more time off, I think I will. And it's going to be a good trip, I hope. It's going to be scary. I speak the language, but that doesn't mean that I'm comfortable in that setting, because it's totally different than what I've known the last 33 years of my life.
Can you tell me if you've had any experience with like bullying, discrimination, anything of that sort?
You know, I don't know back in the 80s, in the early 80s, if we had that hot buzzword like we do now with schools and with online bullying. I think it happens. For that example of me scaring a kid on the playground because I didn't speak the same language, they teased me. I mean, that went around like wildfire on the playground, saying, don't go talk to that chick. You know, she's not cool. She's an alien. She's weird. She says things I don't understand. Don't go near her. It's just safer that way. And I guess that's a form of bullying, but because we didn't really identify that as a huge social problem, I think personally for me, it just helps me to build a thicker skin and to be able to be prepped for in the future for harder, you know, sayings or circumstances. I think it may be better. I mean, not to say that we shouldn't discount bullying and what it's done to kids in the future, or in the present and in the future. We do need to address it, but because in the 80s and the early 80s it wasn't a term that we threw around, you know, easily, I don't think it was addressed. But it does happen. I'm not saying it, and it will continue to happen in some fashion or form, but it should teach that student or individual to build thicker skin and to embrace your different person, different ability and characteristics. It's not something to be ashamed of.
What about in your professional life? Has that come up at all?
I think more so it's more so being a female in addition to being a minority. Being that I'm in the automotive industry for the last 12 years of my life, it's hard to have people take me seriously, especially when the automotive field is heavily dominated with older, middle-aged Caucasian men. They don't take females very seriously, especially a minority. What do I know about marketing, or what do I know about automotive trends? So I think for me, and this would be my advice to any minority female business professional out there, is get your data right. Get your data, you know, memorize it, understand it, regurgitate it, and get it from the right source. That is your best friend in a meeting, in a conference, because they can't deny that. They can deny the fact that you're a minority female, and they can kind of gloss over you and not take you seriously. But when you spit out data, that's when they're like, that individual knows what they're talking about, and that's where your credibility gets formed. But for me, I look younger than I am. It's the Asian gene. You might have heard of it. But I don't let that deter me, because it just makes me work twice as hard to get people to take me seriously and to get me to the point where I am today professionally.
You have any stories about that kind of experience?
So I remember when I first got out of grad school, I was 23, and I was working for a startup company out in Dallas, and they flew me out to Fort Lauderdale for one of the largest automotive dealership chains in the world, or in the country at the time, 250 dealerships across the nation. And I'm supposed to talk to the senior vice president of the campaign that we were working on. I didn't know what I was doing. I was scared because I thought just like what your question was. Do you feel like you're not good enough, or you're too young, or you're a minority status, or whatever it may be? Yeah, that was going through all my head. But my CEO had the confidence in me, or else he wouldn't have sent me with him. So he told me the best piece of advice: be prepared with data. If you know your stuff, nobody can deny that. So that was one instance. Another instance, a few years down the road, I was in a conference room with, again, full of males that knew what they were talking about and had 20 plus years of experience, so why would they listen to little old me? Well, unfortunately, the topic was social media, and that was a hot buzz term, back in 2000, 2002, 2004, so it was kind of new, and people were still grasping, how do we play that into the automotive world and customer service? And around the table they go, and unfortunately, everything they were citing was just erroneous, just horrible, and I'm like, when am I going to get a turn to speak? They would always bypass me when everybody would go around. And I thought, do I need to raise my hand? What do I do? I kind of did one of these because I wasn't confident that they would call on me, and I was scared I was interrupting. I finally just stopped them when the next guy was going to bypass me. I said, hold on one second. Let me show you some data. So I whipped out my binder, and I said, this is this, that, and the other. And they were like, oh, light bulb. Maybe she does know what she's talking about. She might be young, and she might be female, and she might be minority. Maybe that's a triple threat, but she knows what she's talking about. So I think I've built my credibility up since then, and I've never let anybody really tell me otherwise. Yeah, there's moments I'm wrong, but I learn from it. But don't let people tell you otherwise just because you're a minority or a female.
So when you were younger, what did you want to do with your life?
I wanted to be a singer. So when I was younger, part of our culture, we didn't have MTV for Vietnamese. What we did have was VHS tapes that were like MTV. It was Vietnamese songs and these girls shaking their thing, and singing pop songs and kind of converting some of the English songs that were pop songs into Vietnamese. And I loved it. I was bouncing around the house singing, and I actually could hold a tune. Well, my mom thought I was cute and adorable up until I was starting to become a teenager, and then that's not cute anymore, singing in the room, trying to make myself be a pop star. I said, one day, Mom, I'm going to be a singer. She says, no, 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 no. A good Vietnamese girl does not go into that industry. Well, these girls did. How come they're on the video? Well, they're just different. Good girls like you are raised to be doctors and lawyers and engineers. I was none of that. So turned out to be a business professional. But you know what? My mom held me back. She didn't allow me to go sing at venues. She didn't want me to be in talent shows, in the local talent shows. She stifled my dream to be a country singer. But you know what? As I got into college, I still formed a band on my own. She didn't know. We were 2 hours away. So what did she know? But I told her afterwards. And I wanted to be a country star because if you think about it today, there's not been one Asian American country singer. Maybe one day, but right now there hasn't been any. And unfortunately, I don't know if that's something that people are seeking, if that's a demographic that resonates with people. But there's only been, I believe, 3 African American country singers since the 70s. I mean, Darius Rucker being the current one. So how hard is it for a minority to break into the country genre? Very hard. But that wouldn't stop me. If some talent agency found me tomorrow and said, I'd like to offer you a contract, I would quit my day job. And I have made that quite clear with my employer, so it's not like this is a secret. But that's my passion, is singing and having my country twang and being good at it. And nobody could ever really figure that out from looking at this face, because I have, an APAC logo, I'm in a business suit, but my passion's really singing and being a country singer. But my mom stifled it, so maybe I'll be one at 40. It's never too late.
Kind of being a musical pioneer, if you will.
Yes, I would love to be a musical pioneer. That would be great.
What was college like for you? You mentioned having formed a band, but what else was going on?
I went to Baylor, a very heavily religious school. It's a Baptist school and private. So back then in 2002 when I first enrolled, it was not diverse. I was one out of maybe 2 or 5 in a classroom of how many, 50 plus, that were of color. And I didn't let it get to me. I think it was more of a proud moment, like, yes, I can educate you about the Asian culture. I know something. I can show you. But it did teach me a lot of things on how, I guess the word ignorant might be a little harsh, but I'll use it anyways. People are not privy to other cultures, not sensitive to learning other cultures. So I think it was a wake-up moment to say, these privileged students, from other cities who come to Baylor, they're not used to somebody like me who grew up dirt poor, didn't have much, and worked her way into college with scholarships. Didn't have somebody who would just write a check every semester. I worked for it. So I think they appreciated that. And for me, forming the band, again, it was 4 guys and me. And they just loved the fact that I was the token minority in the group, and they loved it because that's how we advertised when we were doing coffee shops around town. I mean, not like we got paid, but we got airtime, and people were like, "Oh, you guys are actually good. You write your own music. You do music very well." So it was a good time. I thought I was going to get discovered then. Didn't happen, but it was fun while it lasted. A good old 4 years, I think.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about your band. I'm curious now.
Casablanca 108 was what it was called, and the reason for that was we practiced at one of our bandmates' apartment, off-site, off-campus. And we're like, well, what are we going to call a band? We had these crazy, outrageous names with me being the only female and being a minority. And we're like, no, that might be considered too much. That's a faux pas. And then, we looked at the apartment number. Next thing you know, it was the Casablanca Apartments, number 108. And that's how we formed. We would come after school, after classes, and rehearse. And we entered into the college talent show and won 2nd place, I think, one time. So it's pretty cool. It was a good time, and unfortunately none of us live in the same state anymore. We've all kind of diverted elsewhere, but we still keep in touch through Facebook, the power of social media. So how do you think your personal history has affected your career choices? What do you mean my personal history? Like how I came to be and my upbringing?
How you grew up, that kind of thing.
I think the way my parents reared me gave me the best work ethic that any employer would want in an employee. That's good for the employer, bad for me at times because I don't know when to cut off work, and I struggle with that terminology, work-life balance, because I'm so invested in what I do and love helping the community and helping the entrepreneurs in the Asian community. But I can't thank my parents enough for all the strict upbringing they gave me, where I hated it, and I still do sometimes, but it wouldn't make me the person I am today. I wouldn't have 2 degrees, because I'm a slacker at heart. Nobody wants to go to school, really, and sit through classes, and then to get another degree after that. I mean, it takes a lot. But if it wasn't for my parents pushing me and prodding me and giving me heck, I don't think I would be where I am today. And the work ethic is bar none, and I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I am. I mean, I've never had an employer say, you could do more. It's always been, wow, how did you think of that? And thanks for thinking of it. So I owe it to my parents for the work ethic they've instilled in me.
When you think of your nationality and your heritage, how do you self-identify? What do you think of yourself as, I guess?
I'm an American. I mean, at the end of the day, no matter how I look, you can't place that on anybody when they're born here. I would say I'm an American with some flair and panache. What that means is I can add some value in a conversation when it comes to culture and globalization and the trends of, an Eastern Hemisphere. I have knowledge. I lived it. I know what it's like to live, put 1 foot in Western, 1 foot in Eastern. So those who struggle with their identity is like, do I call myself Asian, or do I call myself Asian American, or am I full American? Just do you. Just be, what are you comfortable with? For me, I'm comfortable saying I'm a full-blooded, 100% American with some panache. So when you want to know about Vietnamese culture, I'm here to help you. If you want to know about Chinese culture, I could talk about a little bit about that too. My mom's a quarter Chinese, so that makes me like an 1/8. But still, I could talk to a little bit about that. So I think that's how I would describe myself, and that's how most people should describe themselves, because we're a melting pot now. Whether you're, Palestinian, Arabic, Chinese, Indian, and you're born here, your roots come from somewhere else. So be proud of it, but you're still American.
What would you tell an Asian immigrant who has just arrived here in the United States?
Pack a lot of patience. There's a lot to take in, a lot, and it's going to be scary. And don't be scared. So be patient and don't be scared. Be open. Trust people. And it's hard to trust, right? When you're coming from something that you know day in, day out, and it's your livelihood and it's your comfort zone. It's hard to step out of that comfort zone and make it your new comfort zone. Make it your own new normal. Patience is key, because you're learning a new language. For most, it's learning a new language, not all. It's learning about where to go, how to act in society, what's kosher, what's not. So just be patient and learn a lot from the people around you. So use that support group that is already here. I would highly suggest any immigrant from various countries to connect with their people, and to find a chamber of commerce that will connect and get them more comfortable. They'll never be 100% comfortable right off the bat, but to ease that, alleviate that pain, that growing pain that they're experiencing, is very pivotal and vital to being a successful and great citizen of America.
Is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered?
I'm very blessed with where I am today, and I just hope that anybody watching this, especially the younger generation. I mean, I'm young, but I'm on the cusp of being a millennial, but whatever you call after millennials, just learn. Learn a lot. Be proud of your roots. Don't discredit it. It's what makes America America. It's what makes you pivotal to society. We can't have people that are all the same. It makes the world a lot better and a lot more rounder when you can add more depth to society. And be proud of who you are. I mean, I can't say it enough. I used to be ashamed of being the different kid that looked different, that spoke differently, that ate the food differently, and that stunk, the whole cafeteria because my mom packed my lunch. You know what? Looking back on it, I was proud. I am proud. At the time, when you're 6 or 7 or 10 and you get ridiculed for bringing in a stinky egg dish, not so much. But you got to keep that in perspective and be humble and be proud of your ethnicity and your heritage and your roots, because it's gonna dwindle generation after generation if we don't do something about it. At least retain that little thing so that there's something to talk about in the history books for years to come.